Well, folks, today we are going to be doing a 2028 presidential bracket. This is from CNN. I know, not really the biggest fan of CNN, but ultimately they have a March Madness style 2028 presidential bracket for the Democrats and the Republicans. We are going to be going through this right now. We'll start off. I'll be nice. I know I lean a little center right, but I'll be nice. We'll start off with the Democrats with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Obviously, I think this is a pretty clear choice. They're both terrible candidates. Kamala Harris should not have been the nominee in 2024. They should have done what Obama wanted. He wanted a primary at the convention, an open convention. They were going to figure it out then. Ultimately, she really had to beg Biden. She had to beg Obama for the endorsements. She got it. She was the nominee. And if you don't really remember, I know this was 6-7 months ago now at this point, but if you don't remember, she lost all 7 swing states. Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So ultimately, pretty bad. And you could say Tim Walz didn't do anything to help out in this race. Ultimately, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, should have been the vice president. Ultimately, I believe that he said no. I believe they offered it to him and he said no. But ultimately, this is a pretty clear choice. It has to be Kamala Harris. Tim Walz, this is the guy who said that he made friends with school shooters, and ultimately I know he meant something else, but the guy's a bumbling idiot. He's from my home state. He represents my home state. This state is terrible. We've imported so many damn Somalians. They've overrun the entire state. It's just terrible what Tim Walz, what Mark Dayton, what the line of Democrats have done here, but Tim Walz has done nothing to help that out. We went from a $20 billion surplus to now we're going to have a $9 billion deficit. Yeah, thanks, Tim Walz. That's just wonderful. Now, between AOC and Ruben Gallego, who is the newly elected senator from Arizona, he beat out Kari Lake in 2024. I have to go with AOC, simply because of her fundraising capabilities. We saw in Q1 she raised almost $10 million. Okay, she raised in total $15 million for her 2024 re-election bid. What's going on? You don't you're not raising all this money going all around the country on this fighting the oligarchy tour unless you have serious plans. And ultimately, she can attract a big portion of the party. We know Bernie Sanders is not going to run again. He's already said he's not going to run. But he still represents a big faction of the Democrat Party who needs a new leader, and I think AOC is that new leader, and for those reasons, AOC 100% wins here. Now, between Wes Moore and Andy Beshear, honestly, Wes Moore has really grown on me. If you'd listened to some videos from 2-3 months ago, very critical of Wes Moore. Ultimately, Wes Moore just vetoed a bill that was going to provide African Americans in Maryland with reparations. Ultimately, I really agree with that. I agree. Veto that bill. There's no reason reparations should be paid out right now. No reason. But like I said, definitely has grown on me. But then you have Andy Beshear. He is a Democrat governor of Kentucky. Actually, one of the most popular governors in the country. In a state that voted for Donald Trump by 30 points. It's kind of insane because you look at this. Back in 2023, Beshear won by 5 points over an African American attorney general from Kentucky. He flipped it. You go back to 2019, obviously won by less than half a percentage point, but ultimately, and he has become a very popular governor at the end of the day. And so now Wes Moore has come out and said he's not going to run. Ultimately, do I believe that? I don't know. I think if you get to a general election, I think Beshear probably plays out better for those, but it's close. I mean, we're talking 51-49. This is truly a coin toss right here. Now, Gavin Newsom and Stephen A. Smith. You have to go with Gavin Newsom, even though I think he's lost, and I've talked with a lot of Democrats that believe that he is lost standing with the Democrat Party simply because he's moved to the middle, because he started to move further and further to the middle. He said, no, we don't want more illegal immigrants on our healthcare system, which the dude's a paper tiger. Let's be honest. He is not doing this out of his values, or he's staking, putting a stake in the ground, and this is where we're going to stake. No. This has to do with he wants to win, so he's moving to the center. But ultimately, it's hurting him with the Democrat base. He's moving away from he's criticized mentally ill young men and women's sports, something that the Democrat Party as a whole, ultimately they don't support it, but there's a big vocal minority that does support it. Stephen A. Smith, Ultimately, he's a personality. We've talked about this before. I think it would be interesting to see how it played out. Just simply, how would I say? He could be like the Trump of the Democrat Party. Someone who could come in, just say whatever the hell they wanted, self-fund, just do whatever they want. But ultimately, I have to go with Newsom right off the bat right here. Now, between Gretchen Whitmer and Rahm Emanuel is, of course, he was a chief of staff for Obama. He was, I believe, was he the mayor of Chicago, I think? I think it was Chicago. And I know he was an ambassador to, like, somewhere in Asia, like Japan or China. He was an ambassador under the I believe it was the Biden administration, but then, yeah, chief of staff during Obama's administration, and Gretchen Whitmer. I have to go with Gretchen Whitmer right here. There was a lot of people that thought that she should have been the nominee in 2024. There's a lot of people that thought she should have been the VP pick in 2020. I think she definitely has, she has appeal. She has appeal in a state that Trump won twice, obviously expanded his margin from 2016 to 2024, but he won it twice. And Biden only won it by little under 3 percentage points in 2020. At the same time, you saw when Trump was winning elections in Michigan. Now, granted, she was elected in 2018 and then 2022. So they're midterm elections. But ultimately, she performed very, very well. You look at the governor's race in 2022 against Tudor Dixon. She won by 10.5 percentage points. Remember, it's like still increased her margin. And remember, this was supposed to be a better year for Republicans. Ultimately, we know it didn't turn out to be, but still. And I think she definitely has broader appeal with inside of the Democratic Party just as a whole. We kind of have to talk about the general election and the primary. I think ultimately she would be in a much better position to win over Rahm Emanuel. Now, Pete Buttigieg and Cory Buttigieg. It's funny, I've been listening to some people say Buttigieg. I have to go Pete Buttigieg. There's a number of reasons why. The guy's a smooth talker. He's a smooth talker, and he's not afraid to go on shows and platforms that he knows aren't friendly. Conservatives do this all the time. They'll go on MSNBC. They'll go on CNN. They'll go where they know the crowd is not with them. But Democrats, they never do that. How often do you see? I bet you I could name on one hand the number of Democrats that have gone on Fox News. Like serious, big name Democrats. Kamala was supposed to do an hour interview with Bret Baier, showed up a half hour late and then cut it 10 minutes short. So if you even want to count that. Buttigieg, he will go on Fox News. Bernie Sanders will go on Fox News. And I'm sure there's a couple other ones that will go on there. Maybe John Fetterman. Buttigieg definitely has appeal. Now, he has got a lot of liabilities, especially when it comes to African Americans, which I see if he were the nominee, there would be a suppressed turnout among African Americans simply because Buttigieg was leading the ticket. And among, religious, like Baptist, I think that may be an issue because he is an open homosexual. He is married. He has kids. And he also has a lot of scandals that go along with the Biden administration. We'll get into that in a second. But ultimately, he would beat out Cory Booker, who... The guy's an empty suit. He went up and gave a 25-hour speech over nothing. He was filibustering nothing. That is the epitome of the Democrat Party. It's theatrical politics. It's as simple as that. Now, John Fetterman and J.B. Pritzker, this is a difficult, I shouldn't say difficult, because I know who I'm going to choose. It's going to be J.B. Pritzker. Simply because, A, there's a lot of people in the party who resonate with him. B, he was the governor, an executive. He was in that executive position for one of the largest economies in America. Number 3, he can self-fund. He is worth like $3 or $4 billion. He can self-fund. Now, a lot of issues with Illinois, a lot of liabilities. Just like most Democrats, a lot of liabilities. And there's liabilities, don't get me wrong, over here. But I think Pritzker would be in a much better position. And then this is Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro should have been the nominee or the VP in 2024. Maybe would you have seen if it was 2024? Maybe. God, I don't know. That's hard to say. Could you see Democrats if Democrats won Pennsylvania? Ultimately, it's like Trump still wins with Pennsylvania, but maybe, does he cut the margin down for Republicans in places like Michigan? So now it's you're within like a point. But then I also think there would have been a lot of issues, especially when it came to the fact that he's a Jew. And on the Democrat side, I think there was a lot of Palestine. I think there would have been a lot more support. You want to talk about Michigan, maybe it would have gone the other way. Maybe it'd be a place like Wisconsin that maybe would have flipped to the Democrats. Maybe Michigan became a stronger hold for Donald Trump simply because of the amount of Arab Americans that are in Michigan. And maybe you could see someplace like Minnesota being even closer because of the amount of Arab Americans in Minnesota. So ultimately, I think he would have helped out a lot. Do I think they would have won with Shapiro? No. I don't think it didn't really matter who ran in 2024. Well, who replaced Biden in 2024. But yeah, I don't think it would have been that big of a change. Ultimately, but he should have been the nominee. Let's just put it out there. He should have been the nominee. He's a very popular governor, and I mean extremely popular governor from a state that voted for Shapiro by 15 points and then turned around 2 years later, voted for Trump by 1.5 points. It voted for Biden by 1 point. Voted for Shapiro by almost 15 points. That's a pretty big swing. And that's something they should have 100% leaned into. Okay, jumping over to the Republican side. J.D. Vance and Josh Hawley, very, very clear, it is J.D. Vance. Josh Hawley is this type of Republican who likes to play into these class warfare. I'm just not that type of Republican. I'm not at 100% in alignment with J.D. Vance, don't get me wrong. But J.D. Vance, 100%, he is kind of the de facto nominee, you could say, as of right now for the Republican side. He's leading in most polls by, I think there was a margin recently that we showed that Vance was leading on an average poll was leading by like 30 points. Now, in that same poll, Donald Trump Jr. was in it. He already came out and said he's not going to run. So you could see how does that, where does that support to go? Does that, 18% for Trump Jr.? Okay, how does that split between Vance, DeSantis, RFK? How does that split up? We'll see. Nikki Haley and Ted Cruz, very clearly Ted Cruz. There were 2 points in the 2024 election where I was really got like a pit in my stomach. We'll start with the most recent one, which was when Joe Biden dropped out. I had a pit in my stomach when Joe Biden dropped out for about 3 weeks. I vividly remember I was actually sitting right where I'm sitting right now. I actually had a different desk. I have a new glass desk I got probably about a month or two ago that I really, really like. But I was sitting here, I was working, and it was a Sunday, got the notice. Whew. I was writing articles, because if you didn't know, before I did YouTube, I also have a website, the Rife Report, which it's definitely slowed down. We're actually kind of revamping the website as of right now. But that's what I did before, was we wrote articles, and we advertised it on social media through Facebook and Instagram, and had a pretty big following. We probably had 20 or 30,000 people a month coming to our website. Obviously, we have a much bigger following on YouTube now, but I remember sitting here writing an article, and yeah, I had a pit in my stomach. The second time, or the other time in the 2024 election when I had a pit in my stomach, was at the idea that Nikki Haley would be the nominee for the Republicans. You want to talk about a warmonger? Want to talk about someone who would regress the Republican Party? You're looking at her. Look, does she have more broad appeal? Absolutely. Do I think she has more appeal to Democrats, independents, moderates? Yes, I do. But ultimately, I would be very, very scared, especially what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Ukraine. These foreign policy issues, I like Trump's peace through strength foreign policy. I do not agree with the Bush era, their idea of what foreign policy should be. Now moving on to Marco Rubio and Tom Cotton. I'm going to have to go with Marco Rubio 100%. I think between Vance, Rubio, and DeSantis, those are my top 3 picks. Ultimately, I could see a Vance-Rubio ticket in 2028 as being very successful. Look, Marco Rubio, I've not always been keen on Marco. I have not always been the biggest fan. But my gosh, has he proved me wrong? Talk about being Secretary of State. Oh my gosh. Look at you saw yesterday. He was testifying in front of the Senate. And he really started to go after Chris Van Hollen. He was just came out and was swinging. I really love to see it. And the reality is the Republican Party, since the 2000 election, when Hispanics in Florida helped deliver Florida for Bush, the Republican Party has made it a point that they are going to do everything they can for Hispanics. They're going to do anything they can to get their vote. Marco Rubio not only is very popular, he looks like the future of the party. And although I don't like to play into the identity politics, I'm just going to acknowledge reality here. The reality is he looks like the future of the party, and he's a young guy. He's a good-looking guy, young guy, well-spoken. For politics, he's a younger guy. Yeah, I 100% over Tom Cotton. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and Tim Scott. I have to go with Tim Scott here. I don't think either of them are very good candidates on a national level. Look, Sarah Huckabee, she's the governor of Arkansas. I think she's doing a good job. She was a good press secretary for Trump. Tom Scott, he's a good chair of the National Senatorial Republican Committee right now. He also is a good senator from South Carolina. So I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you why either of them. I don't think either of them would be a great candidate in the race. Ultimately, though, I think Tim Scott would have more appeal in the Republican Party than she would in a general, not only in a primary, but also in a general election. Now, DeSantis and Donald Trump Jr., I clearly have to go with DeSantis. Trump Jr. already said he's not running. Number two, Ron DeSantis has overseen the state of Florida, a state that he is America's governor. He did the things that Trump is doing in his second term in Florida. You want to talk about really getting control over these agencies that are managed by the executive branch. Really getting control under that. That DeSantis has been doing that. DeSantis has done a wonderful job. If you're a Republican governor, look to what DeSantis has done. That is the model that we should all be looking at. Remember, DeSantis won initially. I don't even think he won by 1%. I think it was like half a percentage point. Not even half a percentage point. DeSantis won over Andrew Gillum, who was a supposed crack addict. Fast forward to 2022, wins by almost 20 frickin' points. Massive, massive election victory. 100% will take DeSantis. Plus, reportedly, he's got like $9 or $10 million cash on hand from his 2024 bid still. So he's got a good cash cushion to get started in a race. Now, Brian Kemp and Elise Stefanik. Now, neither one of them. Look, I have to go Brian Kemp. I'm not the biggest Brian Kemp fan. Look, I was a big Brian Kemp fan at the idea of him running for the Senate in Georgia because John Ossoff, very vulnerable. Kemp is very popular in the state. Like, that mixture right there just puts him in a good place. And Elise Stefanik, I think she's going to run for governor in New York. We'll see. She represents a district in New York. Let's see, it's New York 21, upstate New York right here. Obviously a very conservative district, but ultimately I just don't think she has aspirations to run for president, at least right now. It sounds like she's going to run for governor against Kathy Hochul. You also could see Mike Lawler, who he represents. Gosh, where is he? He's right here, I think. Yeah, New York 17. So we'll see what happens, but I have to go with Brian Kemp simply because I think he'd have more appeal within the Republican Party. He'd be able to fundraise a lot better. He's got a good fundraising network within Georgia. I think he'd be able to do good just relative to Elise Stefanik. I think that he would be the better pick. Greg Abbott and Kristi Noem. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of Kristi Noem. Can I just say that? Is that okay to say? I'm just not. Greg Abbott's also not, like, my favorite. Like, I think he's done an extremely good job. Like, but if we're talking, like, to be president, like, he's not my top pick. Definitely up there. Definitely top 10. And Kristi Noem is not in my she's not in my top 100 people to be president. It's like, I may even say Nikki Haley is the Republican nominee before Kristi Noem, and that's saying something. That is really saying something. Not the biggest fan. Greg Abbott's done a great job. He's been a really good governor from the state of Texas. Did a really, really good job trying to really defend his state from the regulations and overreach of the Biden administration, from their complete lawlessness when it came to allowing tens of millions of undocumented illegal immigrants to flow over our border. He did everything he could to stop that. And Texas has turned into, like, this was... Democrats had the blue Texas dream. Look back in 2018. 2018. Cruz only won by 2.5 points. Trump only won by 5 points? 5.5 points in 2020. Clearly, it is now a Trump plus 14 state. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, if anybody can hear it, I'm starting to get a cold that's coming on. I've, made homemade chicken noodle soup and, eaten a lot of fruits recently, but still it's kind of been a struggle. So I apologize if it sounds, I am pausing here every now and again because I got to take a water break or I need to hock something up and spit it out. So just apologies if you're noticing that at all. But ultimately, I think Greg Abbott would be a relatively good pick over Kristi Noem. Now, between Glenn Youngkin and Doug Burgum, you have to go Youngkin. Youngkin knows how to win in a left-leaning state. Remember, this is a state that voted for Harris not only by 5 points then, but voted for Biden by 10 points. Go back to the Obama era. Actually, I'm trying to look for Mark Warner. That's what I'm looking for right now. Go back. Look at this. 2018. Voted for Tim Kaine by 16 points. Voted for, where did Warner? He had won some pretty big. Here we go. Warner won back in 2008 by 31 points, just a little under 2 decades ago. This is a massive, massive Democrat state, especially at the state level. Then you have a healthcare, was he a healthcare executive? I'm trying to remember exactly what Youngkin did, but he was a executive on some type of company, came in, ran in the gubernatorial election, ultimately won a pretty big victory over the former governor. Obviously, you can only run for one term at a time, but beat him out on a parental school choice education based campaign. He knows how to win in tough seats, in a tough state, in a tough election. I'll take him over Doug Burgum any day of the week. Youngkin's probably in my top 5 if I'm being honest with you. Okay, and now we're going to move back to the Democrat side, round 2. So now, the further I get into this, the more you really have to consider general election implications. I think, the first and second part of the second round, you can consider primary. But really, if you're getting down to your last 4 or your last 3 people or 2 people that are going to make it, you really got to start thinking about a general election. So I think ultimately AOC, Kamala Harris. AOC would do great in a primary. I think she could win a primary if the DNC didn't rig it against her like they did Bernie. And I think every year that goes on, they have less and less power to actually do something like that. I think there's going to be a lot of donors on opposite sides of the party that are going to pour money into each of them. But if I had to put it down to it, I think this is hard. I think in a primary, AOC wins. I think if you're talking AOC Kamala, I think AOC wins in a primary. You're considering a little general election, but I think so. That's what I think. Now, if you're talking Gavin Newsom and Andy Beshear, so you have an actual moderate and then a pseudo-moderate. Well, look, Gavin Newsom's going to be very well funded. Don't get me wrong. Andy Beshear is a guy from Kentucky, a Democrat from Kentucky. He knows how to win in states like that. I think he could really open up the map. Do I think he's going to win Kentucky in a presidential election? No, I don't. Do I think he could really make it a close margin? Oh, 100%. Go back and look at this where you go back. Well, you can say, let's just say, let's 88 like this. Arkansas voted for Bush by 14 points. Fast forward to 92. It votes for Clinton, obviously his home state, by 17 points. Granted, Clinton only got a 53% majority in a lot of these states. He didn't even hit a majority in them because of Ross Perot. Look at this. Minnesota, Ross Perot, a quarter of the vote. You can go back and look at the same thing with Jimmy Carter. You saw in 72, Nixon wins the state of Georgia by 50 points. Fast forward, it votes for Carter by 33 points. Not as many big turnarounds like that. But ultimately, do I think that Kentucky in 2028 would go to Beshear simply because of that? I don't think so. I think overall, you have to go with Gavin Newsom in this race. Even though I think he's fake, he's a pseudo-moderate. He's just trying to, go with the wind. He's trying to go whatever direction the wind will blow him. That I think he beats out Beshear Gavin Newsom is just much more, I don't want to say popular, it's much better name recognition. Lots that goes into it, but I think Newsom would win. Now, between Whitmer and Buttigieg, honestly, I have to go with Buttigieg. Simply because what box does Whitmer check? They're both white. Obviously, she's a female and she can check that box. But he's gay, and I think being gay, I think that box outweighs being a female in the day. Because we know the Democrats, they care so much about that. They care so much about that sort of stuff. But ultimately, I think Buttigieg would be a better candidate, not only in a primary, but a general election. I feel like there's more funding, more support, more donors that are going to be willing to put money behind Buttigieg. And ultimately, I think that Buttigieg, they both are good in the sense where they're willing to go into unfriendly territory. I just think Buttigieg is better and would win out. Probably like a 60-40 flip for Buttigieg. Now, J.B. Pritzker and Josh Shapiro. This is kind of a difficult one for me, if I'm being 100% honest, between Pritzker and Josh Shapiro. Pritzker, obviously, lots of money, doesn't need the donor base, but he would have donors behind him, but also has a ton of money that he'd be willing to spend. Josh Shapiro, he has that swing state, the ability to win in a swing state. To win in a swing state by 15 percentage points. In a state that hasn't voted for either candidate by more than, 2 points in the last, or maybe 3 points in the last, I don't know, 15 years. Okay, voted for Trump by under 2. Voted for Biden by under 2. Trump under 2. Okay, 13 years ago. It'll be almost 18 years ago? No. 16 years ago. By the time the 2020 election comes around, or 2028, that's a hard, I think I have to go Shapiro. I think you have to go with that appeal. The Democrats need to get away from this elitist appeal. And the two candidates that have made it so far is AOC and Shapiro, who appeal to working class voters, who do not have that elitist stigma associated with them. Now, on the Republican side, J.D. Vance, Ted Cruz. J.D. Vance, you have to go that direction. I love Ted Cruz. I think he's a great senator. I think he's a great patriot in the Republican movement, in the conservative movement. Ultimately, I just think J.D. Vance, for how articulate he is, for the donor base that he'll have behind him, and the grassroots support behind him, that it's really, who does Trump give his blessing to? Is it going to be Vance? Is it going to be Rubio? Is it going to be DeSantis? Is it going to be Youngkin? Who is it going to be? Marco Rubio and Tim Scott. Rubio wins in a heartbeat. We kind of explained this before. Neither of them I thought would be great. Rubio looks like the future, talks like the future. He is the future. He is the Republican Party. You want to talk about where Republicans made huge gains in the 2024 election? Look no further. Seriously, look no further than Hispanics. The amount of support that's been gained and garnered with Hispanics. You cannot deny that. You cannot deny, the 20, 25, 30 point swing for the Republican Party. Simply look at Florida. Look at 2016. Look at these. Palm Beach, 15 point for Clinton. Broward, 35 points. Miami-Dade, 29 points. There was just some huge news. Miami-Dade now has more Republicans registered in Miami-Dade than Democrats. Even look at this from 2020. Look how much these shifted. This is huge Hispanic support right here. Huge Hispanic support. You can also look in Texas at this. Go back to 2016. Look at all these blue border counties here. Voting for the Democrats by 30, 36, 40, 60, 56, 51, 35, 32. Look, massive support. Fast forward to now, there is not a single county in this area that's voting for a Democrat by more than 15 points. Even here, look at this. They've even cut down the margin here by almost 20 percentage points. But look, not a single one of these is voting. Look, you had some of these 60 points. Jim Hogg, Texas, 56 points. Now it's at 8 points. Holy crap. This is a star county, Star, Texas. Clinton, plus 60. Now it's a Trump, plus 16. Talk about Hispanic support. Why is Marco Rubio winning? That's why. DeSantis and Brian Kemp, you got to go with DeSantis. He is much more favorable among the conservative movement. Brian Kemp, I hate to say it because I'm going to say this right now. The 2020 election was won by Joe Biden. I'm sorry, that's going to hurt some people's feelings. Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Can you say that the media maybe suppressed the Hunter Biden story? Sure. Was there voter fraud in the sense where votes were just thrown out, votes were not tabulated? No, that did not happen. If you have evidence of it, I'd love to see it. I really would. Because I've been waiting for 5 years to see the real evidence of it. But there is no evidence of it, or at least evidence that we've seen so far. But unfortunately, Brian Kemp was still injured pretty badly because of that. He was injured in this race, or in that race, basically saying, I'm going to do what the law tells me I need to do, and that hurt him with the Republican Party. Now, so obviously, Ron DeSantis wins. Money. He's America's governor. Yes, is Brian Kemp, I think, was he a good governor from Georgia? Absolutely. Do I think he would be a great senator? Yes. Do I think that he's going to win? Do I think he could do actually halfway decent? I'm of the view of I actually think he would do halfway decent in a primary, but he's not going to win it. And then moving on, Youngkin and Abbott. I have to go with Youngkin. I just think it was what he did in 2021. He knows what he's doing. He knew how to key in for these races. He knew what he needed to do to win this election. And he executed. In a state that voted for Biden in 2020 by 10 points, to then vote for a Republican in the governor's race by 12 points. Now, yes, do we know they're a bellwether state? They usually vote the opposite way of the party that's in power. Yes, I understand. But it still takes a candidate to execute, like a actually good candidate to execute on this. They're not just like handed the election. They actually have to go execute on this. Now we're down to our final 8. AOC and Gavin Newsom. Honestly, I know some people might roll their eyes at me for this right now. I'm going AOC. I think the Democrat Party is so lost. They do not know who their leaders are. They are just so out in the wilderness right now. And at AOC, with what she is doing, she is going across the country, getting the support of getting grassroots support of voters all across the country, raising millions of dollars every single month. And I think there is serious dissatisfaction with Gavin Newsom inside of the Democrat Party. And for those reasons, I think she wins. Josh Shapiro and Pete Buttigieg. That's an interesting fork in the road there. And I'm simply going to go with Buttigieg simply because I do not think the Democrat Party will nominate a Jewish man. I'm sorry. I don't think he will be the VP. I don't think they will nominate him. He will not. He just won't be. I do not think that the Democrats will be able to do that. They will lose so much support in Michigan, in Minnesota, places with larger Arab populations. I just don't think they're going to do it. And I do think there is some serious anti-Semitism inside of the Democrat Party. Now, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. This is a hard one right now. If you'd asked me 2 months ago, I'd have said Vance. Now it's tough. Rubio's really proven himself to me. I think right now I'm still going to go with Vance. I think we need to see more of what Marco Rubio has to offer, how he performs over the next year or two. I really think we need to see that. But right now, J.D. Vance, I see him winning. Youngkin and Ron DeSantis. I think they're both very formidable candidates, very good candidates. I think they both could be in the run-in for a VP position. Just like Rubio, I think he could be in the run-in for that as well. Gosh, but ultimately, as of right now, I just because looking at opinion polling this far, I just have to go with DeSantis. I feel like DeSantis will fill. J.D. Vance will take a big void that Donald Trump will leave in the party, but I do think Ron DeSantis does pick up a lot of support. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Having no coffee this morning. It's already the afternoon. Wow. That's how much you can see we've been trying to pump out YouTube videos today. It's already the afternoon. And actually, we've got a meeting here in 17 minutes about that. But ultimately, J.D. Vance, Ron DeSantis, AOC, Buttigieg. I think at the end of the day, the Democrats do go with Buttigieg. And I think at the end of the day, Republicans would go with J.D. Vance just as of right now. When the election gets into full swing, this map could totally change. But ultimately, if I had to pick between Buttigieg and J.D. Vance, I think Buttigieg has a huge issue with African Americans. Huge issue. There's huge amounts of African Americans in Georgia, in North Carolina, in South Carolina. Places that ultimately, Georgia and North Carolina, are going to be huge. huge for them. You're going to see the big metropolitan areas that have huge supports of African American support in New York, in Minnesota. You go down to Hennepin County, Ramsey County, Dakota County. You're in Illinois. You go up here to Cook County, DuPage County. I think that he will struggle extremely bad with African Americans. And that's a voter base that Democrats rely on. They rely heavily on them. And for those reasons, J.D. Vance would be the winner in my prediction. I actually have a Buttigieg-Vance matchup coming out here pretty soon. So we're going to talk more about essentially what I feel about Buttigieg and how he would seriously underperform. Black turnout would crater. I'm not going to say 50%, but it could crater 10%, 15%. But this is where I have 2028 presidential bracket. J.D. Vance is our winner in this. If you like this, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. Is there something you'd do different in here? Let me know down below. And as always, folks, we'll catch you next time.